Henson, the licensed Unity teacher here at Unity of Columbus. Our lesson this morning is Living from Sufficiency. Earlier this month, we received 2 excellent lessons on the art of demonstration from Reverend Seward and Reverend Wisner. Both Unity ministers explored the importance of using our power of faith to demonstrate good in our lives. Both explained how faith is activated through affirmative prayer. We learned that what and how we think will manifest in our affairs, that our thoughts, words, actions, and especially our attitudes govern our demonstrations. They both emphasize that when you pray, be prepared to move your feet. Reverend Seward said, "Don't expect gold dust to fall from the sky." And she reminded us that if you want to win the lottery, buy a ticket. I especially liked Reverend Wisner's story of achieving her lifelong dream to travel with the Unity group on a trip to the Amalfi Coast of Italy. She manifested the vacation by changing her thinking from one of lack to one of seeing sufficiency in her finances. This year, we used as our Sunday services framework the book Practical Metaphysics by Eric Butterworth. This month, we are working with the final chapter, Demonstration. Eric defines demonstration as answered prayer. Sometimes the process is called manifesting something you want. Yesterday, several of us completed the Spiritual Enrichment and Enhancement, or sometimes known as SEE class. The class was Prosperity. We read and discussed for 12 hours 3 required books: Prosperity by Charles Fillmore, Spiritual Economics by Eric Butterworth, and The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist. I recommend all 3 books to you because I personally received a deepening of my faith and understanding of prosperity. I will share with you today some of my experiences through this growth process of working with others in a class and using the concepts presented in the book in my everyday life. Prior to the SEE class, I had read a number of Fillmore's books, including Prosperity. In fact, I had read Prosperity several times. I had read Eric Butterworth's books. However, I had not read both Prosperity and Spiritual Economics together. Then adding The Soul of Money made the experience especially enriching. The combination of reading the 3 books brought my understanding of truth full circle. It is as though I'm wearing new glasses. I feel that I am seeing so much more of life through this deeper understanding of prosperity. I'm really able to see the difference between a consciousness of scarcity and one of sufficiency. I reread the 2 Unity books in early October. I thought it synchronistic that our October guest speaker, Reverend Cedric Miller, gave us a wonderful lesson that morning about the negative effects of living from a scarcity consciousness. Let us briefly consider a few definitions and the 5 Unity principles covered by both Fillmore and Butterworth as a backdrop for this lesson. Prosperity is spiritual well-being. It is sufficiency thinking. thinking and experiencing healing life, satisfying love, and a sufficiency for all of our needs. The word means according to hope, to go forward hopefully. It is not so much a condition in life as it is an attitude towards life. The truly prosperous person is a fully functioning individual, one who is experiencing what Jesus calls the life more abundant. It is not just money or things. It is, like our special music today, living on the sunny side of the street. Scarcity thinking is not just a lack of money or things. It's a negative way of seeing our life, our circumstances, and the world. Metaphysical interpretation. It is the unity key to understanding Scripture. Scripture is not to be read literally, but for purpose and meaning. Understanding names, symbols, and characters gives us a way to understand the universal meaning of Bible stories in our own lives. The first unity principle, God is. God is absolute good, everywhere presence. God is not an entity that is present. God is the very presence of all life, eternal, infinite, unchanging. The second unity principle, I am, the Christ within us. Human beings have a spark of divinity. We are inherently good. We are the light and life of God in expression. Correctly using and speaking from your I am will lead us out of the desert of negation into the promised land of plenty that flows with milk and honey. The third unity principle, the law of mind action. Human beings create our experience by the activity of our thinking. Everything in the manifest realm has its beginning in thought. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. We do not manifest every thought we have, only those thoughts that we hold in mind and infuse with our power of faith and imagination. The fourth unity principle, affirmative prayer. Prayer is the most creative form of thought. Prayer heightens the conscious connection with God-mind and brings forth faith, wholeness, and everything good. Prayer does not change God. Prayer changes us. By expanding our awareness towards the Christ consciousness, we move up in consciousness. Every thought is a prayer. Every word is a thought in activity. And when spoken, goes out as a vibratory force that registers in the divine, all-providing universe. Prayer aligns us with our source. We experience oneness with the divine Christ, the I am, the one presence, the one power, all love. The fifth unity principle, living the truth. Knowing and understanding the laws of life, also called truth, are not enough. We must live the truth that we know. God does not give us material things. God gives us ideas that set spiritual forces into motion so that things begin to come to us by the application of the law. Today, our Old Testament Bible story, interpreted metaphysically by Eric Butterworth, comes from 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 1 through 7. It's about the widow who came to the prophet Elijah in distress. She had been left destitute following the death of her husband. Her creditors were pressing her, and her 2 sons, according to Talmudic law, were forfeit for her debt. She cried out to Elijah, "My husband is dead, and the creditors have come to take my sons." Elijah asked, "What have you in the house?" She replied, "I have only 1 pot of oil." Metaphysically, Elijah was asking her, where is your consciousness? What are you thinking about? What are you identifying with? Elijah instructed the widow to go to her neighbors and borrow additional pots. This suggests the need to expand the mind to include new faith and vision, to try on new thoughts and insights. She borrowed additional vessels, which meant she broadened her horizons of expectations. Elijah blessed the oil, claiming the divine law of increase. She poured the oil from her 1 pot into the new ones, and it flowed freely until the last vessel was filled. When there were no more containers, the oil stopped. In other words, as much as she could conceive and believe, she could achieve. Her initial reply, "I only have 1 pot of oil," indicated that despite the 1 pot of oil, which was evidence of presence, she was centered in the awareness of poverty. She was possessed by fear and thus had cut herself off from the divine flow within herself. She had a pot of oil, but to her it was only 1 pot. To her, it was a symbol of lack. She was plagued with the very common problem of loneliness. The story illustrates that regardless of what we have, our thoughts are often subtly centered in what we do not have. Jesus was said to have had no assets, but he went about without money or credit cards. But his awareness of God and his faith assured him that all his needs would be supplied. I do not suggest that we go around without money, but it is for our good to live from sufficiency, the same level of consciousness expressed by Jesus. We too can live from the same feeling of affluence, the same attunement to the divine creative flow within us all. And by the way, recently in a chapel meeting led by Darren Wells, our board president, we read from the New Testament, Luke chapter 8, verses 1 through 3. And it states, Jesus went out through cities and villages proclaiming the good news. Mary, called Magdalene, and Joanna, the wife of Herod's steward Chusa, and Susanna, and many others, provided for them out of their treasure. When I reread the widow's story, I was reminded of a story Reverend Mel Ryman, the co-minister here when I first started at Unity. It was about Charles Fillmore. In the early beginnings of the Unity movement, Fillmore envisioned building a spiritual complex at what is now Unity Village. At a meeting, he asked congregants to pledge to a fund to establish the work. No one initially responded, but as a joke, one man came up and offered a penny. To Charles Fillmore, it was no joke. He saw it as evidence of sufficiency. He declared his faith and said to everyone, "We have begun." Again, during that first weekend in October, I was reading the Fillmore and Butterworth books as I was making a road trip with friends to a health symposium in Connecticut. We first made a side trip and met a woman. Her name is Aching. After Aching's business meeting with our driver, Eva, Aching invited us to a nice restaurant overlooking the Monongahela River. And she told us some of her life story. Aching is originally from Ecuador. Her mother was a tribal native of that country. Her Ecuadorian heritage will become relevant later in my story. Aching married a man who was a university professor. This was how she immigrated to the United States many years ago. She had first established herself in the retail clothing sales business. When the Twin Towers fell on 9/11, her business was virtually wiped out. She said she did not commiserate long. She decided to take what money she had left and find another way to establish herself. Soon afterwards, an older man that she had met years before decided to retire and offered to sell her his business in a good location near the university. She decided to buy the building, though it needed extensive repairs. She renovated the building over time. She put in apartments on the top 3 floors and established an Asian grocery market in the large basement. Today, she is thriving. As we left the restaurant, she brought to our attention all of the beauty around us, the trees, the sparkling river flowing past us, the decor of the restaurant. Together, we even examined the fresh herbs outside the restaurant. This was all further evidence to me of her positive outlook on life. Aching's sharing was fascinating. It helped me to deepen my unity principles and understanding of the Fillmore books that I had been reading minutes before meeting her. One passage that resonated with me deeply as I walked into her basement grocery store. Fillmore states, "You have called out faith in things spiritual. You have faith in God, and you have cultivated your unity with the one mind. If you then use spiritual judgment, do your work in love, you have become a teacher in Israel." Aching never mentioned religious topics, but in reading the book's sufficiency passages, and unlike the widow with only 1 pot of oil, Aching stated, "I looked at what I had and moved into real estate. My ears had perked up. Here before me was a real person expressing her Christ I am with I have, I can, and I will. Expressing belief in her own inner sufficiency. In spite of a severe setback due to 9/11, she remained positive. As things moved forward, she was sometimes offered business deals with dubious or exploitive motives for earning profit. On one of these occasions, her husband encouraged her to take the money. She emphatically instead said, "No, I do not want that kind of money." She maintained her intention to be in service to all those in her community. Her husband understood and never broached the subject again. Today, she's involved in ethical deals that rise to the $6 million level. She is keeping the high watch and demonstrating a high spiritual consciousness that attracts a life of abundance of good things. She is living from sufficiency. My friends and I got back in the car for the final leg of our trip. I thought at first that this was a lucky and lovely coincidence to have this experience of meeting someone with such a commitment to integrity. She found no temptation to compromise. She only wanted what was her own good. I became curious. Is this a coincidence? We got to our destination and joined up with others attending this symposium. I was reading Fillmore about the need to release from consciousness any stinginess or scarcity consciousness and the principles of forgiveness. He talked about how the failure to forgive blocks the flow of our good, similar to how fear blocked the flow of oil for the widow. I should not have been surprised, but I was, when I met someone who was in what appeared to me as a scarcity state of mind. I will refer to them as the divorce survivor. This person often spoke of getting vindication in court. There seemed to be no expression of moving forward, no clear expression of forgiveness. In Butterworth's book I had just read, God cannot supply lack. This is because lack is a state of mind, and the condition cannot be remedied until the state of mind is altered. To me, this person's attitude seemed limited by what the courts would decide. In my own spiritual practice, I still say a prayer for the highest and best outcome for all those involved in the divorce. I concluded, too, that in prayer and in moving forward with the intention of service to this unity community, all of us in the SCE class had set into motion the process of our own spiritual evolution. My reading and my thoughts about what I was reading had attracted to me experiences that supplied what I needed to grow in understanding with depth. I was able to see real people, one person living from a sufficiency consciousness compared to another person living from a scarcity state of mind. Based on our SCE class discussions, all of us in the class have increased and developed greater faith in ourselves as co-creators with God of our own reality and have achieved higher levels of prosperity consciousness. Both prosperity and spiritual economics can be succinctly summarized as positive and practical approaches to Christianity based on the teachings of Jesus. The third book, Soul of Money by Lynn Twist, is not a unity publication. Lynn is a global activist working to end world hunger. She has worked for many years on humanitarian projects around the world. Lynn's book gives deeply moving insights into our cultural attitudes towards money. She asks us to discover our relationship with money, to assess our core human values, and then to align our relationship to money to our life-serving goals. In doing so, we can raise our consciousness and transform our lives. The Soul of Money brought the other two readings again full circle for me. Though Lynn never mentions religion or God, it is one of the most spiritually informative books I have ever read. Every time I have read prosperity, I always stop and contemplate Charles's idea that we must give up the idea of yours and mine. With this reading, I stopped again, and at several other places, especially with the final chapter when Charles states, "The whole world today trembles before this giant error idea, the belief that money is the ruling power." Eric states in the beginning of this book, money is the tangible representative of intangible spiritual substance flowing through us. The soul of money picks up on both of these ideas. Money as energy, and that it is not the ruling power. Though she thoroughly explains how the era idea that money rules everything causes chaos in our world, and she brings to our awareness how money has become the ruling false god. It's an idol. She begins the book with her meeting a tribal group in Ecuador where the tribal people had no experience of money, no word or concept for money. They had always lived in a community of mutual support for one another. Remember, I told you that Aching's mother was a tribal native of Ecuador. I did not ask about her heritage and what had been the culture she grew up in. But having now read The Soul of Money, I suspect her culture of mutual support in the community, rather than profit, was an influence for her way of thinking. Lynn's story of her own life exemplifies one of sufficiency consciousness. She too is a true teacher in Israel. May we all this morning cross over and permanently stay on the sunny side of the street. We can decide to live from sufficiency consciousness and know that as children of God, we are as rich as Rockefeller. We no longer see life as challenges to overcome. Rather, we see it through new lenses. We see life as the wonderful and exciting adventure that it is. As we allow ourselves to be guided by the Christ within, we declare the truth of abundance everywhere present. We know that whatever our need, we can manifest our supply. God's will for all of us is health, happiness, and prosperity. Therefore, we know that life is always biased on our side. It is biased on the side of love and healing, adventure and freedom, and a more expansive expression of itself through us. We are created in the image and likeness of the divine. We claim a life of divine purpose and meaning. We claim divine order. We place our complete trust in God. Let the church together say, Amen. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Blessings to everyone.